What's up, Taiwan? I'm Jaime Ocon, and here's what's new in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan's two biggest opposition parties have reached a last-minute deal to join forces for the country's presidential election. It's an agreement that could reshape January's race. Stash Butler brings us this report.
A major twist in the tale of Taiwan's January 2024 presidential election, because two of the four candidates in that race have agreed to join forces. Now, Ke Wen-je of the Taiwan People's Party and Hou You-yi of the KMT will run together on a joint ticket. They're going to look at polls to decide which of them should be the presidential candidate and which of them should be the vice presidential candidate. Going into this meeting in Taipei today, the stakes were very high because Taiwan's presidential race is decided by a simple majority, and for months the leading candidate has been the one from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, current Vice President Lai Ching-te. Hou and Ke have been sitting in second and third for weeks. Figures from their party said the only way for them to win this race was to join forces, and that's exactly what they've done today. They're going to look at the results of polls from the last week and a couple of days from now, and we'll know within this week the result of those polls and see who will be leading this coalition into that election. Will it be Ke, the former Taipei mayor, who will be the first president if he wins from a third party, or will it be Hou You-yi, who once led Taiwan's police force and has now had a glittering political career to follow that? We'll know very shortly. Patrick Chen and Stash Butler in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
High-profile leaders are landing in San Francisco for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, including the contentious arrival of Chinese President Xi Jinping. We check in with our reporter Joyce Sung, who's there.
Dozens of people are waiting across the street from the downtown San Francisco hotel where Chinese President Xi Jinping is believed to stay as he's here for the APEC Leaders Summit. It's the controversial leader's first day in town, and behind me are some of his supporters here to welcome him to the United States. Earlier, though, there were a handful of Xi's critics expressing their anger over Beijing's violent and oppressive policies. But these protesters were quickly escorted away by police. Anti-Xi protests aren't the only ones. Demonstrators have been gathering downtown for days, some urging a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war, others calling out the 21 APEC members for the millions of dollars spent on hosting them this week, all while San Francisco has been battling crises of drug addiction and homelessness on its streets. Now Xi's arrived just as American counterpart Joe Biden also landed in San Francisco. He's staying at a hotel a little further away from the summit venue, closer to the city's Chinatown. The two are set to meet on the sidelines of the summit, the first time in a year for them to do so, and the stakes are high as they aim to improve fraught U.S. and China relations. Justin Wu and Joyce Sun in San Francisco for TaiwanPlus.
Washington-based think tank the Cato Institute has released a report confirming that there are over $19 billion worth of delayed U.S. weapons to Taiwan. Now, TaiwanPlus has seen an early copy of that report. Its findings show that 62% of the delayed systems are considered traditional weapons, with just two orders of F-16 jets and Abrams battle tanks making up over half of that category. 22% of the overall delayed systems are so-called asymmetric weapons, things that are cheaper and more survivable, like high-mobility rocket systems, drones, and Harpoon coastal defense missiles. The last 15% are munitions. Now, for more on what this means for Taiwan's security, I spoke to the report's author, Eric Gomez, who's with the Cato Institute's Defense and Foreign Policy Department.
Before we get to the findings of this report, can you quickly explain what's the difference between asymmetric weapons and traditional weapons?
So asymmetric capabilities are primarily asymmetric because of how they counter an opponent. So if your opponent has a lot of ships and a lot of airplanes and a lot of tanks, a symmetric response would be building your own ships, airplanes, and tanks to fight theirs. An asymmetric response would be investing in different ways to counter them. In the context of Taiwan, asymmetric capabilities usually refer to especially land-based systems because of their mobility, systems that have a small logistics footprint that is harder for China to target.
In this new report, your findings show that a vast majority of the weapons that are delayed are traditional weapons. And that's despite Taiwan's military trying to improve on this asymmetric strategy. So what does this say about the way that Taiwan's military is currently shaped right now?
So I think it tells us that Taiwan is still very much in the traditional military tradition, for lack of a better word. And it makes, I think that, it's easy to criticize Taiwan for this, but I think it makes sense given some of the limitations they're working with, right? Moving to an asymmetric defense strategy comes with trade-offs, and it does make your military less flexible. It does make it more limited in what it can do. You can't get that much for any unit amount of money. Now, if Taiwan had a defense budget of $30 billion a year, then some of this trade-off between asymmetric and traditional goes away because you can afford to do both.
One of the biggest recommendations that you've put forward is for the US to start restricting Taiwan to only purchase asymmetric weapons. Do you think that that's actually possible?
I think that where I'm sitting, the primary value the United States can have is using the leverage we have, right? Because the United States has a lot of leverage over Taiwan in terms of, or a lot of potential leverage, because we are the only real external arms supplier. If the United States were to tell the Taiwanese, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z if you want to get continued support, I think there's a high likelihood Taiwan would comply. The problem is politically, we haven't been willing to really do that, or in attempts to sort of do that in the past and tie certain forms of support to Taiwan to Taiwanese behavior, often sort of politically doesn't work out on the US side. But the question is, would the US have the political willingness to follow through and actually do something about that? In terms on the Taiwanese side, I think that it would be difficult, right? But I'm kind of okay with putting Taiwan in a difficult position because we haven't put them in a difficult position, and we've gotten the self-defense strategy that we've gotten.
That was Eric Gomez from the Cato Institute based in Washington, D.C. The Labor Ministry says Taiwan's worker shortage is set to keep growing. It's predicting tens of thousands of newly vacant positions in the first quarter alone. With the local workforce aging and shunning blue-collar jobs, the question now is whether migrant labor can fill that gap.
A pillar of Taiwan's economy in trouble. Manufacturers like this metal parts maker accounted for over 30% of the country's GDP last year. But it's getting harder to keep these machines running. As the population ages, more workers are retiring, and few young people are replacing them.
传统制造就是本是属于人力密集的工课啊，都是靠技术本位嘛。啊，就嘛这没人哦，后面就是自然就是没有人去拿这个订单。
A survey this month by online job bank 104 found the number of unfilled jobs in Taiwan had broken 1 million for the 9th month in a row. And if government predictions are right, that number will go up another 50,000 in the first quarter. Manufacturing is far from the only hard-hit sector.
现在年轻人不喜欢我们这种工地劳动的。
餐饮业啦，量贩业以及这个饭店业、观光业、运输业的部分，其实可能还是人才比较吃紧的一个情况。
For years, migrant labor has helped to plug the gaps in Taiwan's workforce, but it hasn't fixed the problem. So far, Taiwan only accepts migrant workers from 4 Southeast Asian countries. Some sectors like agriculture still have strict caps on hiring them, while others like hospitality remain closed. Talks about opening to Indian workers are expected to move forward by next month at the earliest. But officials say the reported number of Indian workers to be let in, up to 100,000, isn't set in stone. All this raises questions of whether Taiwan's million worker shortage may simply become the norm, leaving its key industries struggling to fill the gap. Klein Wang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Meanwhile, labor rights activists and unions in Taiwan are calling on the government to increase employers' mandatory pension contributions. Rick Glauert reports.
Here at Taiwan's Executive UN, labor rights activists and labor unions are calling on the government to up the mandatory pension contribution from the current 6%. Taiwan has more than 4 million people aged over 65, and it's a number that's increasing. Taiwan is heading towards a super aged population within the next few years. That means more than 20% of the population will be over age 65. This puts a strain on many aspects of society, from national defense to the healthcare system. The activists here say it's up to the government to do more to make sure that people who have retired have more in their pockets to look after themselves. Andy Schreer and Rick Glowett in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Israeli forces say they're carrying out a precision operation inside Gaza's largest hospital, targeting Hamas, who they say has a command center under the complex. Thousands of patients and displaced Palestinians are sheltering inside Al-Shifa Hospital, which the World Health Organization says is no longer functioning due to a lack of fuel and medical essentials. Hamas denies claims that they are operating from the hospital. Israel began its military campaign in Gaza in response to Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel. The U.S. has called for hospitals and civilians to be protected.
We want there to be safe evacuation for patients at hospitals so they can get out of harm's way. We would support an independent third party or respected third party to conduct those evacuations. We know the government of Israel.
Water cannons are being deployed in India as New Delhi continues to suffocate under a blanket of toxic smog. Reese Ayers has the story.
Blasting water into the skies to fight smog in the world's most polluted city. These are New Delhi's attempts to lift the toxic blanket that's smothering the Indian capital.
परेशानी तो यही है कि हम जैसे आते हैं सुबह वो लगता है ऐसे फॉग है लेकिन होता स्मॉग है बेसिकली आप जब इनहेल करते हैं तब पता लगता है गले में तो थोड़ा बहुत जरूर वो रहता है और धुआं टाइप लगता है आंखों में भी जलन सी होती है पानी सा आता है जैसे वो है कुछ ठंड की वजह से भी हो रहा है
New Delhi is no stranger to smoggy skies, but pollution tends to spike after large festivals. Concentrations of toxic chemicals in the air are particularly high after the country celebrated Diwali, also known as the Festival of Lights, last weekend.
ना तो इंडिया गेट दिख रहा ना पार्लियामेंट वाले दोनों बिल्डिंग नजर आ रही हैं लेकिन ये सब सारा का सारा पोल्यूशन बढ़ने का जो मेन कारण है वो हम लोग ही हैं क्योंकि हमें पता है कि क्रैकर्स बर्न करना और दूध पराली जलाना ये सब हमारी स्वास्थ्य के लिए हानिकारक है लेकिन फिर भी हम मानते नहीं हैं दूसरे कर रहे हैं इसलिए हमको भी कौन देख रहा है ये सब अंदर से जो उनकी अंतरात्मा है वो इस बात के लिए मानने को तैयार नहीं है
With over 300 million cars on the roads, vehicle emissions are the largest source of air pollution in India. Coal fire emissions, dust from construction sites, and burning waste and crop stubble also contribute to the issue. The anti-smog guns shoot water droplets into the air. The moisture clings to the pollutants and brings them to the ground.
अभी हमने देखा कि दिल्ली में जब बारिश हुई थी तो खास तौर से जो डस्ट पोल्यूशन था उसमें काफ़ी कमी आई थी जो धूल के कण हैं वो सेपरेस हुए थे अब बारिश का जो असर है 4 दिन बाद अब धीरे-धीरे ख़त्म हो रहा है इसलिए पूरे दिल्ली के अंदर पानी के छिड़काव के अभियान को तेज किया जा रहा है
Despite current pollution levels, experts say that New Delhi's smog situation has been slowly improving over the years. The city has periodically banned older vehicles from the roads and built the world's largest public transport system powered by natural gas. Some experts are looking to Beijing as an example of how hyper-polluted cities can tackle persistent smog. Air pollution there has reduced by around 50% in the last 10 years through a number of measures, including banning new coal capacities and raising engine standards. Until more measures are introduced in India, however, the country will continue to rely on water cannons to help disperse the smog that engulfs its capital and chokes its millions of residents. Scott Huang and Reese Ayers for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, have you ever seen an albino puma cub? Well, here's one at the Nicaragua Zoo. I'm Jaime Ocon. Take care and see you next time.